Hello, Max. Okay, are we all ready for our first session? No one's ready. Are we all ready for the first session? Alright, once again, welcome, good morning, and I hope you had a good coffee break. Before we go on with the first session, I think I was informed that we have at least 10 nationalities with us today. So maybe we could have a short roll call so that we would recognize who comes from where. Because I think some of you don't know that there might be someone else from your country with us today. First, we would like to call on our friends from Cambodia. Can you please stand up? Cambodia. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Arun Susday. Only three, right? Okay. Arun Susday. May we call on our friends from Lao, PDR. Okay. Sabayri. Ready. Welcome to Conken. And I would like to call on our delegates from Myanmar. Myanmar? Oh, we have four. Alumingalaba. Oh, I will be reviewing my greetings. Alumingalaba. I see familiar faces from our partners from our project. Thank you very much. Welcome to Conken. We also have our friends from Vietnam. Vietnam, Xin Chào. Okay. We have our friends from China. China, Ni Hao. Ni Hao. Okay, we also have friends from Indonesia. A big delegate. Selamat pagi. Apa kabar? We also have a friend from Timor-Leste. Bon dia. We have a representative from Timor-Leste. East Timor. We also have a friend from Bhutan. A lot. Gusto lang po. Right. Thank you very much. We also have friends, of course, from the Philippines. There's two of us from here. Mabuhay. We also have friends from Eritrea, from Africa. Is she here? Is he here? Eritrea. Not here. Other countries that I have not mentioned yet. Of course, Thailand. Later. Sorry? Iraq. Iraq. Assalamualaikum. What else? Other countries in here? Of course, Thailand later. Because, sorry? Kenya. Okay, can we have welcome to Thailand. And of course, our friends from the United States. From good morning. And lastly, of course, our host country, friends from Thailand. Stand up, Thailand. A lot. Welcome. Yeah, KKU and MI are from, all of them are from Thailand. So I think we have at least 10 countries with us today, and hopefully you gain more friends by the end of this two-day symposium. And I think it's really important for you to meet other people from your country working on different sectors. If you're from the government and you also want to meet someone from the private sector, and if you're also from the private sector, it's important you know someone from the academe and the universities. So now we can proceed on our first session this morning. We'll introduce first our first set of speakers. I will call them one by one to invite them on stage. Our session one is on global and regional concerns and trends in food safety. For this session, we have three main speakers. We have Dr. Prachatipat Kumpinyo of the Department of Agriculture of the Thai Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives. Yeah. we can invite him in front. He will be talking about food safety concerns and trends in Thailand. We also have Dr. Wacharas Lilawat. Let's give him a warm round of applause. He's the Executive Director, of course, of Mekong Institute, who will be speaking on food safety concerns and trends in the greater Mekong sub-region. And lastly, we have Professor Dr. Francisco Diaz Gonzalez, Director of the Center of Food Safety of the United States, who will focus on global concerns and trends. This session we have, after the short presentations, we will have a Q&A session. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Harit Kano of the KKU International College. And so, yeah, so our speakers are complete with our moderator. All right, and let's all warmly welcome them for our first set of speakers.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to the first session of this symposium. And I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and we're looking forward to a great discussion, under the theme of food safety. And for the first speaker, without further ado, Dr. Prachatipat Pongpinyo. He is actually an expert on the field of food safety. 15 years experience of working in the field, conducting numerous research on soil, water, agriculture toxic substances, numerous publications, which of course we don't have time to go through all of them. So I would like you to put a warm welcome, put your hand together for Dr. Prachatipat Pongpinyo to talk and discuss about food safety concern and trend in Thailand.
สวัสดีครับ Hello everyone. Thank you, the host, to invite me to share some experience with all several countries. Okay. First of all, I want to talk about how the government play its role in the food safety scheme, which is most of the important part in Thailand, important role in Thailand. So this is Department of Agriculture. In Thailand, we want to be the kitchen of the world. So we start this scheme since 2005, and I will show you how the Department of Agriculture plays roles in this scheme. Let's see the mandate of the Department of Agriculture first. So there are three important mandate, which is we conduct the research and we provide the service and analysis to the people of Thailand, and both government, both citizen and private sector. And we transfer the technology to the concerned government official and farmer and private sector. The next one. There are several offices that are involved in this strategy. First one is Office of Agriculture Regulation. So this office is involved in the sales of pesticides under the Hazardous Substance Act in Thailand, and provide the service on the import and export of pesticides. The next office is the Plant Protection Research and Development Office. This office is conduct the research on pests and disease that recommend effective to control measure. The next office is Agricultural Production Science Research and Development Office, which I come from this office. What we do is to conduct the research based on the pesticide residue analysis, the pesticide formulation and quality control of the pesticide that's sold in Thailand. the pesticide residue trial and establish the maximum residue limit, and the impact of pesticides and risk assessment. The next office is Plant Standard and Certification Office. This office involved in the monitoring of pesticides residue in fruit and vegetable that form the GAP farm and the packing house. Certification on pesticide residue in fruit and vegetable for the export. This slide is a little bit old because now the government want to transfer both import and export and the foods that we consume in Thailand under our job to monitor. The next office is Agricultural Research and Development Office, that in the branch of Thailand. We have 6 branches throughout the country. So this office is give a certification on pesticide residue also for the export, mostly on the border, and analysis on pesticide residue formulation also to reduce the workload in the center. So let's see what is the Department of Agriculture strategy to handle the food safety. We control the import of agricultural chemical. We control the farm production. We give the certification of the agricultural products. For the laboratory food safety, we give the accreditation. We audit them. We take the legal measure, and we do the traceability of the food chain, and we establish the MIL for the Codex Committee in the name of ASEAN. Let's see the pesticides that were imported in Thailand since 2010. You can see the pesticide is almost the same level, but for the herbicide, which is used a lot, we were on the highest peak in 2013, and now it's declining. So the first one is how to the control measure that the Department of Agriculture take responsibility. We want to prevent the misuse and the overdose of the usage on the farmer. So the pesticide that was sold in Thailand have to be analysis. Has to be registered and analysis that what is said on the labels is the same compound inside. So for the registrant who want to sell the pesticides in Thailand, have to register the chemical, the formula, and we verify the both in environmental and in human health. This is an example that the pesticide that were on the process of register. So when the pesticide were registered on the seller who want to sell the pesticide to the farmer also have to be registered. So we train the seller to know how to handle the pesticides, how to give the farmer some advice, and they have to know the basic how to handle or how to keep the pesticides that is keep in good condition for the farmers. This is the example that the picture of the training session of the seller in Thailand. Now we have more than 20,000 participants that were trained to be the seller of the pesticides from 10,000 shops throughout the Thailand. So the seller who want to sell the pesticide in Thailand have to be certified, and we also have the list of the seller. On the farm control measures. On the farm control measure, what I showed you this picture is that we show you the farmer how to handle the good agricultural practice to prevent the disease, to prevent the anything that can decrease the yields. This is the farmer of the farm of the durian farm in Thailand. You can see that below the height to make it easier to harvest, and we expand the branch that and we control the weeds. And the farmer also have to follow the GAP guideline. The GAP guideline for each of crops were posted in the website, so the farmer can access easily both in the Department of Agriculture and in the Department of Agriculture Extension. So in the category of the from farm to table, the Department of Agriculture give the certificate to the good agricultural. We give good agricultural practice certificates, and we good manager. I'm sorry, I'm Thai. I'm not good in English. Good manufacture practice also. Next, the previous one is next is a production measure. The production measure, the farmer has to be apply for the membership to be the registered GAP farmers. And on when the farmer apply for the GAP farmers, they have to show what kind of plant they want to do. And the DOA officer will inspect each randomly check that they comply to the GAP or not. So after we inspect, mostly at the harvest stage, if they comply with the GAP, we grant the certificate to them, so they can use the certificate to sell to the buyer, which will give them the good price. So, as I said, the member have to submit the harvesting and the export plan to DOA, and the DOA officer will random monitor the pesticide residue and the packing house at the packing house also. This is an example of the export fruit and vegetable that were notified that even we have a really strict rules for the farmers, some are still passed through the system. This is some example that were notified that they have the chemical compound that exceeding the limit. There are some compounds of fruit and vegetable, but very few amount. I will show you the amount later. RTAFF is a rapid alert system for food and feed. We also have the TIRAF, and we also, because we are ASEAN country, we also have ASEAN RAF, which in still at the early stage, but in the website also. You can see that we have several offices that help the farmers to analyze from whether the soil, the water, the pesticides, how to help them improve their yields. The office will come from both government and semi-government office also. So, for the pesticide residue control measures, the sample was taken from the DOA officer, and submit to the branch office to whether the farm the location of the farm near the nearest office, and we analyze for the pesticide residue. After that, we issue the certificate and they're ready to export. Most Department of Agriculture, we handle the export fruit and vegetable, and now with the order from the government, we also do the consumer inside Thailand also. Before it was in Ministry of Health. Next is sampling and analysis of pesticide residue. I will show you some. This is we sampling every samples from the farmer comply to the guideline from the codex, and we analysis from the trace amount of the compound with the instrument that were accepted in international level of laboratory, which is the last line, GCMS and LCMS, which the more acceptable to the international levels. Now we have two of them, the last on the left, and we have three of the LCMS, which will be on the right. And there's no budget because we are government. We try to ask for more, but still have to come. Okay, what I show you is this is the sample that were analyzed in several offices before they export. You can see that the number that have the problem has a very small number, only 6% or 3%. So even we have the strict rules, there are some cases that still pass to our system. It maybe depend on many parameters. We discuss later. So for the legal measures, if the pesticide residue is exceed the MRLs, the certificate will not be granted. And we need some improvement from the farmers. With the next continuously harvest season, if the problem still exists, we withdraw the farmer status, and this product or the harvest product cannot be exported. Because the buyer who want to export the fruit and vegetable, also when they buying for the farmer, they're looking for the certificate. On the measure of traceability, DLA will inform by the importer or the rapid alert system that the pesticides are exceeding the MRL. And then we check for the export company and check for the pesticide residue certificate, and we take the legal measures. For the export that have the problem with above the level, we will take samples more frequently. If the export they have no problem, the number that we sampling them will be low or zero. So on the rapid alert system, the DOA were the contact point of the rapid alert system in Thailand, and we developed the protocol to manage what the rapid alert give some information to us, and we follow up with the Thai stakeholder, and then we communicate with the EU, because if the problem still exists, they shut the door. The people can the company cannot export to them. So we try to minimize the problem as low as possible. Because we have no tax in product or goods throughout whether the EU or the USA or the ASEAN country. What is the barrier or the wall to prevent is the food safety. So there have to be some numbers or the limit to protect the citizen and the country. So each of the country will have the limit. So the exporter who want to sell the product to the other country, they have to comply with the rules. So we come out with the pesticide residue trial. It's like the center rules. Everyone will share the information, and if the product is good with this level, they can sell in the countries. So what we conduct is to set up the data for the codex. So we set a few trials. We apply the pesticide. We follow the good agricultural practice. The number of the apply is follow with the level because we follow the GAP. So after we have do the research, this is example of the compound that we test, and we follow the good laboratory practice to produce the good quality data, and we submit to the codex. This is an example of the one that was set up. This is in Longan, and the codex accept our data and set up the maximum residue limit in 2007. This is our field trip staff. So the sample from this is Longan. The sample from the tree have to be kept cold and transferred to the laboratory, frozen. So after we have the MILs, we also have the Thai MILs, and among the ASEAN country, we also have the ASEAN MILs. So, and the codex that I mentioned is the Codex Committee of Pesticide Residue that under the FAO and WHO organization. And the one that also have the important roles in Thailand also is AGFS, สำนักมาตรฐาน Measure Standard of Food Safety in Thailand. This is the MILs of only one crops in mangoes that was set up by the Department of Agriculture. So you can see that farmer has various pests, and they have many kind of pesticide that can tackle the pests to increase their yields. This is by far the number of Thai MIL, and as you can see, if they don't have the data, they will dash, and the dash means 0.0 milligram per kilogram. Okay, so the last slide also, because we want to help the farmer increase their yields, and in the market the product have to be beauty and flawless to make the good price for the farmer. So we will help the farmer, the tree, to fight with them. This is the quote that I like a lot, and I will end my presentation with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prachadipat Pongpinyo. And we have learned so much from you, and you also provide trainings and consulting for analytical technique for the Thai Regional Laboratory, which of course in your presentation already show that, it's very useful for farmers and agriculture business as well. Many tests that you have done has been accredited, so we would like to thank you as well. Now we move on to the next presenter. From a scientist, we're going to move to economist in Dr. Washarat Laliwat. So Dr. Washarat actually served, as you know, as the director here, executive director at MI, but he has also served other position at Trade and Development Corporation, under issues of GMS and ASEAN framework. He was also executive director at ITD, or International Institute for Trade and Development, and many of other organizations which is having to do with trade and development. So he's going to be talking about food safety in GMS and the trend and what's going on, overlooked in terms of trade and economics as well. So please put a big hand for Dr. Washarat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harit, for the nice introduction. So please allow me to sit here and to speak with all of you. Yeah, my presentation is on the food safety issues and trend in the GMS. As Dr. Harit mentioned, that I'm an economist, so I don't have the capacity to go into detail on the food safety issues, but we're going to talk about the work that Mekong Institute have done and the issue that is of concern in the Greater Mekong sub-region. And of course, the food safety issue is this is very timely, and the Mekong Institute attended the second agricultural ministerial meeting of the GMS in Siem Reap 2 weeks ago, and actually we delivered the commitment statement to partnering with the government sector, private sector in the Greater Mekong sub-region in push forward the food safety standards and disseminate the knowledge on food safety standards in the Greater Mekong sub-region. And this issue has been endorsed in the second agricultural ministerial meeting in Siem Reap, as I said, and the focus on food safety is aligned well with the GMS vision and the greater AEC vision. AEC is I'm for friends from the United States. AEC is the ASEAN Economic Community, so it's another form of collaboration with 10 countries in Southeast Asia. For the vision of the Greater Mekong sub-region, you can see that leading producer of food, safe food using climate-friendly agricultural practice and integrated into global markets through regional economic corridors. So we will have to make the good use of the regional economic corridor, North-South economic corridor, East-West economic corridor, and Southern economic corridor, and other corridors in the region, and to be the transport way for safe food and safe agricultural products. For the AEC Vision 2025, we have the vision to be the single market and production based and the competitive economic region with the equitable economic development and integrated into global economy. And of course, the food safety issue are increasingly used. Is this the NTM? NTM is non-tariff measures which affect domestic and foreign trade. When we talk about NTM, you probably think about another word is NTB, which is non-tariff barrier. So not all NTM is NTB. So the countries, according to the WTO, the government of each country has their own right to protect the customer, to protect their people. So that's why they have the set up every country have to have the food safety standards. So it depends on it's a right for the country to do it, because it have to protect the consumer and their people. And this is the allowed by WTO, but we have to notify whatever policy, whatever measures that affect the importer and importer. The government have to notify WTO about those measures. So I want to mention that not NTM is not all NTM is NTB. So and the WTO encourage the countries not to use the non-tariff measure as the disguised trade barrier. In some country, I mean, they believe in the protectionism, so they once the tariff is zero, then that they create a lot of barrier to protect trade. So when tariff barrier goes down, non-tariff barrier normally goes up. Okay, so that is the case of the what's going on for the non-tariff measure and non-tariff barrier in the region. I did the research with the ITC International Trade Center in Geneva 3 years ago, and we surveyed the non-tariff measures that affected by the exporter only in Thailand. And we did the survey for 1,100 company, exporting company in Thailand, and asked them that whether they get affected by the non-tariff measure imposed by our trading partner. And if you look at the screen, you can see that agricultural sector, I mean, in average, 38% of the company get affected, but for agriculture sector, 47% get affected. Okay, and this is the sector. I mean, the more this aggregate figure that you can see. The first first two column is the fresh food and processed food. So more of the company under the fresh food and processed food is the most affected. Yeah, which is normal, and it's this data is in line with other countries in the world, because the agricultural product is very sensitive for the human being life. I don't just this is just the diagram that shows the non-tariff measures faced by the exporter. If you see the blue column is the share of the NTM, and the orange column is the share of export. So if you see the column on EU, this is the non-tariff measures that imposed by EU that affect the Thai exporter. So you can see that, I mean, the food safety standard and other standard imposed by EU are very strict. Okay, now it's about the GMS. So the GMS is the Greater Mekong sub-region, is composed of the I would say 7 economy in 6 countries. 7 economies mean because in China there's 2 provinces, Yunnan and Guangxi, and plus the 5 countries in the Mekong region, which is Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam and Thailand. GMS food production. The GMS is the major global producer of many foods. Rice. Thailand and Vietnam is the big exporter of rice, sugar, cassava, and Vietnam is the big exporter of coffee. And other countries export cashew nuts and pepper, especially for the Cambodia. Export a lot of pepper, and very famous pepper is the Kampot pepper in Cambodia. And This is the feature of the GMS food production, potentially competitive advantage, potential competitive advantage in many food. Yeah, because the cost of production is low. Concentrating in the agricultural sector, because as I mentioned earlier that agriculture in the GMS now, I mean, if you look at the GDP, it becomes less important. So the contribution of the agricultural sector to GDP is about 10% to 15%. In Thailand, about 10%. I mean, the proportion, this proportion is going down over time. But what makes agriculture important is the labor force that in agricultural sector is a majority. So more than 50%, you can see 50% of the labor force is in agriculture. But this 50% of the labor force can generate only 10% of the GDP. So by looking at these two numbers, you can see that the stakeholder, the farmer stakeholder in the GMS, they are small stakeholder, and of course they are less fortunate. They are poor people. So that's why it makes the agriculture more important, because we have to find a way to make the living standard of this group of people better. So once we equip them with the knowledge and also with the food safety knowledge, then it's open the opportunity for them to become more competitive, and so that in the future they can gain more from exporting the products. So this is the economic value figures in the GMS. The average growth in the GMS is 8.5%. This is from 1992 to 2014. So the average growth is 8.5%. The highest growth is in Yunnan and Guangxi. It's about 12% to 14%. For Cambodia, Laos, it's about 7 and 8%. But for Thailand, Thailand used to be, the growth rate of Thailand used to be very high before the economic crisis 20 years ago. I'm sure we all were born already during that time. Yeah, and so our growth rate was about 9% to 10% between 1992 to 1997. But after the Asian economic crisis, the growth rate of Thailand is about 3% to 4%. So it's become the new normal in Thailand at the moment. And so this is the case of Thailand. And intra-trade, it has the exponential growth for the intra-GMS trade. This is also the same. We show the data on the ASEAN intra-trade. It shows the same type of picture, and it's grow exponentially because during the late 1990s and now early 2000 and until now, the collaboration between us within ASEAN and within the GMS getting stronger and stronger. The government in each 6 countries in the GMS try to promote the cross-border trade, and also the one of the reasons that contribute to this figure is the reduction of the tariff to 0% under the ASEAN framework. So once the tariff go down, then they trade more. Yeah, and of course, yeah, once the tariff go down, they trade more. And then there's other barrier, which is the non-tariff barrier. For example, the standards, and also the case of the trade facilitation. Trade facilitation, for example, the barrier regarding the custom procedures. So because to export the products, the exporter have to fill in so many forms. Yeah, so it takes some time and it is a barrier. So they try to create the new scheme, which is called the single window. So just when the exporter fill in the information just one time, and the information is circulate to all the government agencies. This is the way that we are the all government of the ASEAN and the GMS are doing. And another thing is what we call to facilitate trade in the region. We GMS country implement what we call SSI, single stop inspection. So for the imagine when you from, let's say, from Laos to Vietnam. So in the past, the inspection have to do it 2 times before it go out from Laos, and then when it's reached Vietnamese border, it have to be inspected again. So it wastes a lot of time. So we have the single stop inspection. Yeah, single stop inspection. So the idea is to reduce the time, because when we talk about the agricultural products, everything have to be fast, because otherwise the products will be turned bad, right? So and it's proved to be very good, and also we have the single stop inspection for people as well. But I'm not going to talk about it now, but I will talk about this in the party tonight. Because it's not related to food safety, so I cannot talk about. Yeah. Another thing is the integration with the international market. So you can see that the export of the GMS country keep going and growing. Yeah. And as you see for the last diagram, this is in this diagram, it shows the the GMS agricultural export. The Thailand, Myanmar, and Vietnam has the large land for the arable land, and the volume of export for Thailand and Vietnam, of course, is bigger than other countries in the region. Cambodia and Laos PDR has the small arable land, and another problem is the limited market access. One of the issues that the countries in the some country in the GMS has the limited access to the regional market and global market is the compliance of food safety standards. The key food development issues. Now I will touch upon the critical issue relating to the development of food system and the critical role of food safety in terms of food security and market access for a food supplier. And from you can see here that the foodborne hazards is the burden and the loss of the country of many countries. WHO, World Health Organization, has estimated that there are over 600 million cases of foodborne illness globally and 420,000 deaths from foodborne disease, and came at the estimated cost of over 5.5 million years of healthy life. So that is a lot. So it's you see how important of the food safety is. So some people are very sensitive about this kind of disease. So, and once it's create a loss and it's foregone opportunity, if it's the food illness kill the life of the working population, then there is the foregone economic opportunity from that death. So, and it is a big loss. So that's why it's become the issue that we need to we encounter and we have to solve the problem. The importance of the risk analysis. It's impossible that we can test the products. I mean, every unit of the products. So, and the best approach have to be the risk-based system. So the well-applied risk-based system can lead to reduced risk of food safety failures and consignment rejections, better protecting consumer and business while demonstrating equivalence, which help to maintain and expand export market access. So it is quite important issues. And when we talk about market access and the compliance of the standard, this is two related issues. And I give you one important example that the work that Mekong Institute do in Kham Muon and Sawanakhet in Lao PDR. For the rice farmer group in Kham Muon, they last year we equipped them with the knowledge on the GAP, and now for farmer group in Lao PDR, this is the and they get the GAP, Good Agricultural Practice Standard, and we also work with the rice miller in Kham Muon, and they are the first rice miller to get the GMP certificate. Once the quality of the products are certified, it's open the opportunity for the rice farmers and rice millers and rice exporter to gain the market access in other countries. We work very well. Our relationship with the partners in Laos is very good, and the thing is, they are very cooperate. The reason is there is the order from China. I mean, the China commit to buy 20,000 tons of rice, yeah, in Kham Muon and Sawanakhet. But the capacity to produce rice last year was 8,000. So this is the opportunity. So that's why, we use the market to create the opportunity, and the opportunity will motivate. I have 5 minutes left. Thank you. The opportunity motivate the farmers and the rice miller to do whatever they have to do to comply with those standards, so that you have the chance to export more in the future. I skipped this because I have only 5 minutes left. So, what drives the food safety in the GMS? Of course, the burden on the foodborne disease trade in food. It's become higher and higher, and the production and the processing volume, and also the length of the supply chain. In the GMS, WHO estimated that 10 to 35 million cases of diarrhea per year in Thailand, only in Thailand. And in Vietnam, the cost of the foodborne disease in terms of healthcare, loss of productivity, foregone market shares are estimated to be $1 billion per year. This is very, very high. And another things that drive the food safety in the GMS is now the capacity of the GMS country to identify the foodborne disease is increasing, and this is one of the factors. And another thing is the consumer awareness. Because of the social media, that is one thing. The income of people is higher, then people become more selective, picky about the food that they eat, right? And now that's why the consumer awareness is very important. Is drive the food safety in the region, and also the private standard in the global global community. We have the Europe, especially Europe gap, but now global gap. So that is the private standard. In Thailand, we have the private standard as well. So when people, for the supermarket, top supermarket like Marketplace and Top supermarket, they have their own standard for the products that they want to put in their shelf. So otherwise, people will. I mean, if people get sick by eating their food, and they will be the first one to be blamed because the food come from their supermarket. So that's why they must have their own standards. Okay, and the food safety trends and initiatives. So this is the work that many partners are doing in this region. As I mentioned, that we work with the New Zealand Aid program to implement the project on the capacity building for food safety in the CLMV, for the CLMV, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam. We conducted the training need assessment and identified the training cost that we want to implement it. So the training course is on auditing and inspection and the management of the agrochemical. So this is the work that we are doing, and we will have the 5-year project with the New Zealand Aid program. So, and we still focus on the capacity building and also the intergovernmental coordination within the country and outside the country. And in ASEAN framework, ASEAN has the ASEAN Expert Working Group on Food Safety and ASEAN Risk Assessment Center for Food Safety. And you can see in the other development partner like ADB, EU, GIZ, and New Zealand Aid program. They also their priority is to implement the project relating to the food safety, because when this development partner they develop or formulate their priority area, the priority area have to be in line with the national development strategy of each country in the GMS. So because the food safety is one of the issues in the national development strategy in each country, and that's why the GIZ, ADB, EU, and New Zealand and other partners set food safety as one of the priority. What's going on? Okay. Oh. Okay. Thank you. So the in the region, okay, we still have some problem on the law. Is outdated legislation need to be reviewed, and the variation of the standards and surveillance system need to balance between the consumer protection and cost to supplier, and improve the coordination nationally and regionally. So this is the key is the regional coordination in the risk analysis. So as I mentioned earlier, that we already delivered the commitment statement in front of the 6th agricultural minister in the GMS 2 weeks ago, that Mekong Institute is committed to do the work, to be the platform of the, and to disseminate the knowledge on food safety issues. And our work is to promote the policy dialogue so that we can utilize the research finding. You know, we get a lot of research from, of course, UGA and PKU, Khon Kaen University have a lot of research on food safety standards, and we can be the mechanism to utilize that research finding and to promote the policy dialogue. So because I think that, I did the research before, when no one used my research, I get disappointed. And so we want to have to be because we invest a lot of things, the times and brain and money in doing the research. So it has to be utilized. So our focus is to utilize the research that KKU have and UGA has. And so we make good use of the research findings so that we can make the real impact in the greater Mekong sub-region. So that is for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for very insightful into what GMS is doing and ASEAN is doing and how it's actually affecting us. Dr. Vasharat actually talked about mechanism like CBT, cross-border trades, and how we can actually improve together many different mechanisms that is being, apply at the moment. Some of the key issues like single window market, integration, communication between different partners, that is affecting food safety. So I am sure, that we have learned a lot and we can learn a lot more. So I would like you to put your hand together again for that great presentation. Thank you.
Say I have to apologize that I have to leave at 11:15 for the working lunch, and then I'll be back in the afternoon.
Okay, that's great.
So for the question, you can ask my colleague, Ms. Tess and Dr. Chun over there. Yes.
Okay. So we're going to keep the questions until the end. Next, we have another distinguished guest. We are honored to have him here today, Professor Dr. Francisco Diaz-Gonzalez. He is Director and Professor of Center of Food Safety, University of Georgia. Some of the research program that he actually looked at include safety of lower water activity food, safety of fresh fruits and vegetables, pre-harvest ecology and control of food-borne pathogens, safety of organic food, safety of dairy food, etc., etc. In my paper here, I have over 30 to 40 different publications just in the last 5 to 6 years. So I am sure, you guys want to listen to him, and he will be giving global perspective of food safety and trends. So put your hand together for Professor Dr. Francisco.
Yeah. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to express my sincere appreciations for the organizers of this meeting, the Konkan University, the Mekong University Institute, and the University of Georgia. It is a particular pleasure for me to be here talking on a specific meeting devoted to food safety. My center is called Center for Food Safety, and I'm a food microbiologist. There was a generous introduction from our host. I've been working on food microbiology and food-borne pathogens. One of the things that before I go on and while we get the presentation up and running, our talk is about global food safety concerns and trends. And we are continuously told that in order to go global, we need to start local. And one of the things that I want to do before I go on in my presentation, specifically on my remarks, I want to ask each of you, and in order, we're scheduled to have a discussion session after I'm done with my talk. Think about how can you personally or professionally advance food safety? That's one question that I want you to think about in the next 30 minutes while I'm giving this presentation, and then we're going to have an opportunity to give us your answer to this question and how you can advance food safety. So while we start the slides, I want to pick up first of all on the message that Dr. Pardue told you this morning, on the fact that we humans as species, right now we're facing a challenge to become about 9 billion people in this planet by 2050. That's the challenge that we have. Now, if you do the math, we don't really have, we say, well, we are about 7 billion, it's going to be only 2 billion more. No, it turns out that we need to produce double the amount of food. That's the best estimate, because from 97 to get to 9.7 billion, it turns out that we are in a current situation in which we are the society, the global society is changing rapidly, and one of the unique features is the fact that the middle class has been growing, in particularly in large regions of the world that include let's see, where's the up here, that include Asia. And because of this growth in the middle class, there's more and more demand of animal foods. And animal foods typically are going to tend to require more resources to produce, because there's a shift of going from cereal-based foods to animal food. So that's one of the reasons why we're facing with this challenge as a global society. So that's basically set the stage that what we're talking about right now is food security. But the topic of today, and that's the area of my interest, is food safety. So food safety, if you put the most global concept is food security. Food safety is critical in order to deliver those foods to that number of people. If there is an absence of safe food, then you're not going to be able to deliver wholesome and nutritious foods to most of the population. So that's a really important component. In this diagram, I also included what is now known as food defense, one of the phenomena that we've been facing, which is intentional adulteration, either due for economically motivated reasons or for other reasons. So foodborne disease is nothing new to humans. We actually evolved having diarrheal disease. Millions of people throughout history died because of foodborne disease. That's nothing new. And in many cases, historically, there were many events that were marked by diarrhea. Leaders that die from a foodborne disease, or entire populations that they were wiped out because of infectious diseases. Now, this is in the world that we live today. You probably 30 years ago, probably you wouldn't have never thought about talking about food safety, especially in developing countries. And let me tell you, I'm originally from Mexico, but as Mexican growing up in a developing country, getting foodborne disease was part of life. Okay, so getting foodborne disease was catching a cold, because everyone was going to get it. But what we changed as a society, and especially developed countries, we realized that no, this is not right. Getting a foodborne disease is preventable and should be avoided at all costs. So that's a paradigm in our culture that has changed, and that's what in the world we are now discussing food safety in almost every single country these days. Now, if you look at all the different risks in food safety, you could put in classified somewhere in this diagram. What we have discussed so far, we can talk about, we're going to be spending a lot of time in my talk with infections, but you could also have the category of intoxications. That's the reason why we're concerned about pesticides and drug residues in different foods, because of the chemical poisoning. But infectious is the part that we're going to be spending today in the rest of my conversation today, and for most of our talks in this symposium. As was referred by one of the previous speakers, there is this World Health Report that if you have any interest in food safety, I encourage to go and look it up on the web. It's probably one of the most comprehensive assessments of how big is the foodborne disease in the world. It's relatively really recent, 2015, And this one basically help us to provide some guidance on where are the importance, where are we having the most problems, and what are the agents that we should be focusing in order to reduce foodborne disease. And these are just taken from the same report. Again, I encourage you to look at some of this. Some of those numbers were already presented. It's estimated it's about 420,000 deaths. 550 million people get sick from from food that's being contaminated. Children are the population that suffers the most. Infantile diarrhea is still pretty common in many places. So it's a problem, but I think the key thing as a global society is this statement: it's everyone has a role to play, and we should be preventing those diseases, those people from getting sick from contaminated foods. From the report, there is a number of data. Again, there is a lot of data to help us guide on where we should be focusing our efforts. It lists 30 different hazards that are the ones that are the most important and responsive for the bulk of foodborne diseases. And in here, I just listed the top 13 of them. We start with non-typhoid salmonella, that we're going to be talking, several of us are going to be talking throughout this conference. And then we have a number of different organisms that we're going to also be discussing: norovirus, campylobacter, etc., all the way down to aflatoxins. Now, there are many differences in the world, and this graph that also I took from the WHO report, it illustrates what is the incidence expressed as disability adjusted life years. And you can see, for the most part, developed countries have a relatively low incidence of foodborne disease. And African countries, for example, those are the ones that are suffering the most with the high incidence of diarrheal diseases caused by contaminated food. And in the case of the region for which Thailand is part of, this is classified as Southeast Asia B. It still has some progress to make in order to minimize foodborne disease. And actually, in this WHO report, one thing that is remarkable is Thailand served as a pilot study to provide some of the numbers that helped draft this report. And from that pilot study, it showed that Thailand has between 10 to 35 million foodborne infections every year. And in Thailand, they were identified for the top etiological agents: Salmonella, Vibrio cholera, Shigella, E. coli. But interestingly, there are some local agents in different countries that normally are not seen there in other regions of the world, such as the liver fluke infection that exists, that is endemic in this part of the world. Now, before I go on, I'm going to be showing some data from the U.S., since this is the country we're coming from, and is the country that actually has, I could say it very proudly, one of the best or the best epidemiological system of the world that is basically helping us guide those numbers. When you see the reports such as the WHO and the data I'm going to be showing you from CDC, you gotta be aware that the way that those numbers were generated were big estimates. And I'm going to be pointing out the fact that those are not real numbers. Those 35, or in the case of the global number, 550 million people that got affected, those are estimates. That's the best way that experts were able to find out, or the best number they came up with. We don't really know what are the actual numbers, and this is the reason sometimes people have some confusion. And even in some of the numbers that I'm going to show you from the U.S., more than 18 years ago, there was a previous report that showed many more people getting sick. Now, in the most recent report, there are less. The fact is we're still figuring out what are the best methods to estimate those global numbers, and we rely on epidemiological information about cases, hospitalizations, deaths, and outbreaks. Now, from the U.S., if you look at the most recent report in 2011 from the CDC, it's estimated about close to 50 million people get sick every year. If you divide it by the U.S. population, which is 300 million, it's about 1 in 6 people get sick from foodborne disease. If you compare to the data from the WHO, if you remember some of the figures I show you, it's estimated that it's 1 in 10 million people, 1 in 10 people get sick. So is this that in the U.S. are more people getting more often sick? So it's a different estimate, that's all it is. So you gotta be careful when you compare them. But one of the important things of this data that in this table that I'm showing here, even in the US, you have a total of 47.8 million. The bulk of the disease, foodborne disease, we don't really know what caused them. That's what is still a long way to go. If you're an expert in the field of food safety, food microbiology, we still need to figure out what causes the bulk of the foodborne disease in terms of agents, in terms of pathogenic organisms. So that's one thing that we still need some progress to make. Now, this is a table that I pulled from the CDC estimates from the U.S. And again, I encourage you. All of this information is on the web. You can look it up really easily, and you will see these are the numbers. In the case of the U.S., we have norovirus, number 1, and then we have salmonella, non-typhoid salmonella, and then we have a number of other organisms, some of the same organisms that we have listed in the WHO, but at the same time, we don't have any of the organisms listed there, like ETEC, EPEC, and Tania, that is listed in the world estimates. Now, the second part of my talk, as the title said, what are the concerns? Well, these are the concerns that we have right now. One of the things that you will see in this report, the report deals about acute foodborne disease. This WHO report doesn't deal with a chronic foodborne disease. Like, let's say the reason why we're concerned about pesticides is because many of them have the potential to cause cancer. So, but those figures are really hard to determine. If it is really hard to determine the numbers epidemiologically for the entire acute disease, it's much harder to determine what is the impact of pesticide consumption in those residues. But we do know that they may have impact. So the trends, that's the second part. The trends are multiple right now in food safety. I guess for a half-hour talk, I wasn't going to have enough time to cover some of them. I'm just going to illustrate a few cases, mostly coming from the U.S. or what's happening right now that is relevant. But it could be epidemiological. Some of them, we're going to be discussing them. Could be technological. Right now, we're seeing major breakthroughs with molecular biology, and we're seeing major breakthroughs in food production in many different ways. Market-driven, that's an important trend that we're not going to have time to discuss. Regulatory, the effect of new laws. For example, the impact that FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act from the U.S., is having in the rest of the world is enormous. Many countries that export food to the U.S. are really having a hard time on making sure that they're going to comply with those regulations. And we have changes in production systems that have shaped the kind of food that we have and the food safety conditions of those products. Now, what are those factors that contribute to those trends? There are multiple. I'm just listing them. We're not going to be having time to go over them. But a lot of what we know right now, it's actually the advances that we have in epidemiological systems. We have the science as advanced. We're better able to detect those pathogens with the modern techniques. But at the same time, we have had changes in the way we produce foods. We have very complex production systems. I'm sure many of you have seen complicated routes on food supply that really makes our life really difficult when it comes down to traceability of food products. The fact that all of a sudden we've seen some pathogenic organisms that we didn't see before. For example, the E. coli 157 that now is really common. It's an emerging pathogen that didn't exist 30 years ago. Globalization is a major factor. That's why we're here today. The kind of food that we're producing here in this country is going to have an impact on a person in Europe, in the U.S. The fact that we are in a society that we have more individuals with decreased immunity, and right now one phenomena that is happening all over the world is specifically the consumer preferences. The consumer looking for more natural foods, less processed, more fresh, and that means opening the door to more food risks, less use of preservatives, for example. That could lead to more potential problems. Now, one of the cases that I want to talk about is, or one of the prize of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the U.S. is what is referred as the FoodNet system. The FoodNet system is an active epidemiological system that keeps track of foodborne disease in different states of the country. And this is data that actually is real data, are numbers of people getting actually sick. And this is what helps us is, this data is the one that helps us to estimate what are the total numbers of foodborne disease. Now, this is all available on the web. This is the beauty of in the time that we're living. A lot of this data, you can go there and find this data right now available on your fingertips. So according to this data, the Salmonella is #1 pathogenic bacteria organism in the U.S. Norovirus is not included here, but you can see that Salmonella, Campylobacter consistently numbered 1 and 2 as pathogenic organisms, and these are real cases per 100,000 people in those 10 states in the United States. And that leads to trends, and this is what we see. If you plot the trends just like that on total numbers per 100,000, you're not capable to see whether something is changing until you actually compare to a baseline data. And this is what all of this, you can pull it out from the website. I think I would encourage you to go to this. There is this new tool that the CDC has put out, which is called FoodNet Fast. You could do all the combinations you want to do in terms of disease, foods, well, not for this one, for the outbreaks, yes, but not for this one. So, but what we're seeing, for example, in some of the trends, that in the case of Vibrio, it seems to be going up in the U.S. Other trends, the Shiga toxin E. coli 157 seems to be slightly on the high, and some of the other pathogens kind of remain the same. So the trends and the rest of the cases I'm going to be showing you are related to epidemiological. Again, we don't have time to talk about all the possible trends that are happening right now, but it could be any of these 4 cases that I'm listing here. It could be changes in pathogen incidence like we're seeing in the previous graph. Some infectious diseases that are emerging that didn't exist before, now they exist. And some novel new food vehicles that we thought they were safe, now we realize that they are not that safe. And some of the changes in surveillance that we have seen recently. Now, let's go back. The first case that I want to talk about is Salmonella as related to a category of foods that we thought they were safe for many years. And this is the graph of Salmonella outbreaks in the U.S. So you could look, again, you could do this graph yourself. If in this case the CDC have this really nice tool that lists all the outbreaks since 1998 that have occurred in the U.S. that have been reported. Obviously, only the ones that have been reported, and that they were able to find that the Salmonella was the culprit. So this is the graph. It takes place year after year. About 120 outbreaks of Salmonella are happening in the U.S. Just to clarify, an outbreak is defined according to the CDC and most epidemiologists as any case in which you have 2 or more people getting sick from the same food or from the same strain of organism. So that's the definition. So in this case, you could have outbreaks that have include as many as hundreds of people or maybe just 2 people. All right. So one of the things that we realized over the early decade of the 2000s is there were more and more outbreaks of salmonella related to dry foods. And this is just a sample of some of those dry foods that are listed here. And this happened during the past 2 decades. So that led to realization that salmonella is really a serious problem in many dry foods. And what's been happening, if you compare another interesting fact about developed countries like the U.S. is the companies are enforced to recall their product, or they voluntarily recall their product when they detect the pathogen in their product, or when the product actually was linked to an outbreak. And in this graph, what I'm showing you is a comparison of 2 years. Just to give you an idea, back in 2000, the recalls, the withdrawal of product from the market, were relatively rare due to salmonella. Now, if you looked 14 years later, the salmonella is with listeria the number 1 or 2 every year after year in terms of a reason to be recalled from the market. And if you look at the 2 of the last years, 2014, 2016, one of the things that the years typically have in common is and I'm purposely shaded the pie graph in blue, is all of those products that have dry, or they are dry products, or they have dry ingredients in their formulation. That was the main reason why salmonella is being recalled. So the message here from this particular case, we have a problem in dry products because salmonella seems to be a pathogenic organism that survives well in those dry products. And at the same time, if you treat thermally those dry products, then the salmonella is gonna survive anyway. The second case, which is a really positive case study from the point of view of trends, is what we're seeing right now with the adoption of molecular techniques that help us identify organisms. Back in the 90s, the CDC implemented a molecular fingerprinting technique called pulse field gel electrophoresis. And this was one of the best inventions that the CDC has had. It's calculated that the use of and this is what typically you get with this technique is a band pattern that shows the unique fingerprinting of microbial strains, and it's estimated by when it's being used in conjunction of the PulseNet system, is basically the database that keeps all of those fingerprints of each strain, has prevented a total of 270,000 illness per year. That's the benefit of having such a database and such a great system. Now, that technique has proven to have its limitations. With the advent of new generation sequencing that we have these days, in which we are able to generate the entire genome of a bacterial strain in a matter of, in these days, well, you can say in a matter of minutes almost, but at least in a matter of hours, now we are able to pinpoint more accurately what are the strains that we're looking at. For example, if a strain was isolated from a patient, and then you find the same strain from a food in a different place, that you can link up the cause of the cause of the disease to that particular food. So whole genome sequencing has been adapted by most agencies in the U.S., the federal agencies. They recognize the value. They have launched, in the case of CDC, launched the Listeria Whole Genome Sequencing Project. FDA, they launched their Genome Tracker database for clinical and environmental isolates that the FDA collected from food plants. They have been screened for a whole genome sequencing. And also the USDA launches its own program. In the case of CDC, they are convinced that the use whole genome sequencing are able, when they apply to a pilot program to track listeria, they were able to solve more outbreaks and actually reduce the number of cases from those outbreaks because they were able to pinpoint and identify the cause of the outbreak much faster. So that they're already seeing the benefit of using this technique. And in the case of whole genome sequencing and the use by FDA, this is the graph that shows its adoption. They have started using it mostly for some, but it's been now applied to Listeria, E. coli, Shigella, and Campylobacter, and this is the graph of its adoption across the most recent years. Why it's such a great technique and it's so useful? Well, because it has all these benefits. It's capable of linking cases to a cause, stop outbreaks were still happening, and we can actually identify the route of contamination if used right. All right. The last case that I want to mention here, because of the concern with antibiotic use that we have all over the world, is the fact that the U.S. has had a database of microorganisms that are antibiotic resistant, and in particular, the case that I want to show here, a few slides related to what are the trends with salmonella when antibiotic resistant salmonella isolated from patients in the U.S. And I'm going to show you, for example, first the resistance of salmonella to ciprofloxacin and ceftriaxone. And what the contrast I want to show here is very different trends from one. This is going up and still continues to go up up to 2014. But in the case of ceftriaxone, it went up and then started to go down. Okay. Now, the concern about antibiotic use, mostly in agriculture, is because we use antibiotics for livestock and in animal production. And oftentimes we're linking up with the fact that the incidence of antibiotic resistance. But at the same time, if you look at multi-antibiotic resistant, some of the worst cases of salmonella multi-resistant, we have the multiple resistant to 5 antibiotics. The trend has been going down in recent years, and in the case of one that emerged in the late 1990s that was going up, and there was a major concern in the early 2000s, it actually went down the rest in more recent years. So that's some trends that we still yet to understand what is the ecology of antibiotic resistance in those pathogenic organisms. Anyway, just to close my talk, I just want to give you a few take-home messages here. Foodborne, we have to recognize that we're dealing with a very dynamic situation when it comes down foodborne illnesses. There are many cases of success stories throughout history in controlling many pathogenic organisms, but many of them we're still not understanding them very well. And we see cases that organisms that were originally controlled now are emerging back again because of the new preferences that we have now. The changes that we see are oftentimes influenced by a variety of factors, and we didn't have a lot of time to discuss some of those factors, but epidemiological data is critical to establish policy and economic priorities in the world and in many countries. So that's one thing that we need to pay attention in those estimates. And we do share a lot of the foodborne hazards that are listed here. Salmonella, non-typhoidal salmonella is shared by most countries. Typhoidal salmonella is being controlled in many countries, but still very, very prevalent in many others. And the surveillance methods, this is something that is being recognized to have a lot of power. Many countries are adapting similar systems to the CDC as we speak, the PulseNet value. And antibiotic resistance is a pressing issue. I think some of the follow-up speakers may be addressing this issue in the afternoon. Anyway, that's all I have today, and I'll be very happy to entertain questions. And please think about the questions that I throw you initially, and I would like to see your responses. And I look forward to the discussion now with the rest of the speakers of this morning. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Francisco Diaz Gonzalez. You talk about how global concern must begin from local, and he gave us a great perspective on the evolution of foodborne disease, the causes, and how it actually affect human life. Talk about new technology like molecular fingerprinting, etc. And of course, at the beginning of his talk, he asked us how can we contribute to food safety. How can individual of us, starting locally, individually, affect the food safety of the future globally? So with that, we of course have Dr. Pachadipat and Professor Francisco here with us. Unfortunately, Dr. Pachad have to leave for working lunch, but we still have two distinguished guests here, and I would like to open the floor for discussion. I am sure you have many interesting questions and maybe comments in regard to food safety, both in terms of Thailand, GMS, and at global level. So I would like to invite, yes, thank you very much, Ajahn.
Very much enlightening. But I have to make some reservation for myself that I'm have nothing to do with science. It's still non-agricultural, non-medical, non-everything. But I'm a lawyer. And what I have in mind when you posed the question was that everything is scientifically proven. Some are not. Some affect long term, next life maybe. We don't know anything much about it. And legislation. We do make law, like in Thailand, food safety laws, all in the books. Now, I believe that it was since 100 years ago we have the criminal law saying that anybody who produces toxicating food or selling something that is non-edible and make believe that it's edible, then will be put in jail for a certain period of time. Now, that hasn't deterred people who actually make profit from selling the products. And now we are in the period where people are looking for getting more profit from what people are eating. How can we tell the people that this is the time that we let our children know that it is us who actually allow that to happen? That the younger generation is not eating right. Now, we in this part of the world, I would say 20 years ago, there hasn't been any research on immunity, whether the people in the poorer areas actually have more immunity from disease than those in the urban area. Which, of course, some people have said, some maybe if this has been proven, it is the natural, we'll say, DNA of people in the rural areas where they are used to have that sort of immunity within their genetic born, and then they're losing it because of the new developments. I'm not saying from where, but people know that pesticide or any GMO things come from developed countries who invent all sort of this advanced knowledge, which of course contribute to the food of the world. But how can we make people in the poorer part of the world realize that they are not the one who will serve the food chain of the world, but serve in a bad way? If you get what I mean, I think that it is very important for the people in the poorer part of the world to say, okay, it is enough for us to eat. We don't need to export more, because if we export more, it means that we will export something which is not safe for the world and limited ourselves. I believe that in Europe or even in the United States, the farms that make profits are the organic farms. The farm that, I don't know for sure, it's just my impression, say that, if you really raise the farm products in a natural way, you sell your product with profit, and you also eat that product that you produce, and therefore it is less harmful to yourself, your family, and anybody else. So it's mean that you save on what health care and many other things that the country would save. And I think we are trying to say to the people in the poor part of the world, say, why don't you do the same thing? If you're thinking of big farm, contract farming in the sense that you have a big company coming in and trying to do something bigger, then you will not avoid something bad that happened to people. So that's my question.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would direct that question to Professor Francisco first. I think it's a question of a balance between safety and profit, and how could individual and local and obviously businesses react and improve together, I guess.
Well, first, it's a complicated issue. As you can recognize, it's not as simple. And I guess I'm going to try to tease up your question or participation. First, how can you convince the farmer? I guess the first thing, and let me see if I got it right. I think it takes a little bit of education, because the farmer can produce food, and he himself is going to make, if he doesn't use safe practice, is going to make his kids sick, or his wife sick, because they are not handling the food well. So it takes some education, I guess, for starters, and it takes some information. For example, something as simple as washing hands. If we all wash our hands, it probably would prevent a good share of not only foodborne disease, but also other types of infection disease. So education, I guess, it could be at all levels, could be really useful for advancing. Disregard whether the farm is going to be organic or it's going to be launching a full-fledged corporation. But I think education definitely it's something that, as I said in my remarks, it started with the realization that this is not acceptable. I guess the moment that we become consumers that are more proactive and that we should not accept that somebody can get sick. But anyway, again, I thank you for your remarks. I think that you're putting the perspective of a lawyer that I can tell you. The other issue is I would be curious how many cases in this country have been prosecuted because of foodborne disease. In the U.S., since we have a lot more enforcement, the cases of people going to jail have been relatively increasing, but still, you could argue that there are not as many, because it's really hard to prove causality from the legal point of view. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bill Marler. I don't know how many of you, if you Google Bill Marler, is the most famous lawyer that prosecutes companies because of foodborne disease. One time he bragged about the fact that he had made $600 million for his clients suing companies. Now, this person, this lawyer, only takes cases in which they have demonstrated the causality. So he settles out of court with the companies. He never goes to trial. Anyway, I'm giving you a long answer.
Wow, no, but that's great. I think education is key, and of course, we are still unsure or about how do we monitor or evidence base of whether something is really right or wrong. So I'll pass again the mic to Dr. Pachadipat to respond to that question.
To answer your questions, I think there are three major sectors that have to help each other. The first one is the consumer perception, because the consumer, they're looking for the good food, but the good food comes for the appearance. It's like mangoes. When the two mangoes on the table, the one with the yellow with no spot and the one with some spot, the consumer will take the yellow one with no spot, because in their mind they believe that this one is sweet, it's good, it's big. And for the farmers also have to be honest to the consumer, because they produce their food and the food is also feed them. So if the honest farmers produce the good food, it would be no problem. And the last one is the company who produce the pesticides. The new pesticides nowadays is better than the previous before, because nowadays the new pesticide, the new compound of the chemical compounds, they attack the pest and they and they dissolve very quickly. So with the new kind of pesticides and the good farmers and the perception of the consumer, we can produce a good food.
Okay, that's another great answer. So three, probably very difficult, customer perception as well. So I welcome, I think one or two more questions, please. Please. Okay, I'll move the mic, might be easier. Okay.
Because we have limited time, so I will talk about myself later. I have two questions for Dr. Pompolio. My first question is, what explains for reduced insecticide import for the last few years in Thailand? First thing. And second thing, you also mentioned that if a farmer subjected to the second violation, he will be withdrawn from his farm contract status and also having no access to export anymore. But what to do with the product that you identify with higher chemical residues? That's two questions for you, and I have my answer to Dr. Francisco question. First, one not comment, but my additional to your observation in Mexico. You said the perception of Mexico people is wrong in regarding the foodborne disease, but I believe that also that happened in many countries, including Vietnam, because the Vietnamese people many also say that the dirty diet make our life longer. See, that's Vietnam, and I believe also happened in Myanmar and Cambodia. And you see that from the Watach's presentation and your presentation, we see so many uncertainty. You see, like most of foodborne disease and the disease trouble are unknown source. First thing, and second thing, when you talk about food safety, you talk about maximum residue level. But here, I also say that we can consider the minimum quantity of like mineral element exists in our food, our diet, because the lack or reduced quantity of mineral element in our food also affect a lot on our immune system, right? And given many uncertainty, I believe that the something we are doing now, like the one window or one stop inspection system, might not enough or might not working effectively. Instead, we have to look for some kind of alternative farming practice. We start from the farming practice to change the whole system instead of controlling. Because we cannot control. How can you control like thousands of pesticides? How you can control hundreds of minerals in the food that determine the food quality? But we don't know. How can you control if like out of 4.5 million people getting trouble with foodborne disease, you can only identify 900 or something like that? But you cannot identify 3.8 million people. That's the cause of the problem. Cannot. We don't know. So think of change, possible change, instead of thinking of more control. That's my answer to your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Should we take one more questions and then we go straight? Okay. Okay, let's
I remember the second question. I'm sorry. The second question is if the produce from the farmers that they have exceed the value, the acceptable value, what will they do, right? Because when the farmers want to export their products to the buyer, the exporter buyer, they sell with a good price, so they will comply as much as possible to the guideline. Because if you follow the guideline, you will have no problem with the residue inside. But if they have the problem, so the buyer will reject them, and they have to find another buyer. That's my question. Or you can, the farmer can sell the product inside the country, which we also have the monitoring program also. Yes. And I'm sorry, I forgot the
about imported pesticides, right? The level of imported increasing.
As you remember that the slide that I showed you, the most of the pesticide that we import is for the herbicide, but the level of the pesticides is almost the same for like 5 or 10 years. So if the farmers follow the guideline, they will use really limited amount of pesticides. Yes.
And one of the comment is about belief, local belief. So maybe comment from both of you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess that's oftentimes what we believe in and what the food is going to do for us it varies very much. I guess sometimes it's just plain culturally. Sometimes we don't really have a lot of scientific data to support it, and sometimes because it's hard for scientists to define whether the product's actually good for you, and it just some people may notice that actually it's good. So that's the perception is something that drives a lot of the food preference these days. For example, the issue about GMO, that's a very contentious issue. For some people who say, well, it's completely safe, it's not an issue. For some people who say, no, it is. So it's the consumer preference right now. It's actually driving plenty of what the potential risks that we're going to be seeing in the future. That's it.
I also agree with that. Yeah, mostly on the perception only, because the good food, what they saw is the good food is the shape and the color first. Yeah. So the farmer also have to produce the produce to look good as much as possible.
Okay, great. May I take the last questions? I think to this lady or well, okay, two. Okay, last two. Please.
So thank you very much for your very informative it's a presentation. I am Dr. Tanan Singh from Biotechnology Department, Myanmar. So it's the professor partly answer it's my questions. So it's due to my studies, I heard about that in American, it's 80% of fresh produce are GMO. I had, and then another one is I'm also interested in the dark edge. Dark edge, they are not allowed the GMO label on the food. So it's they are. I think they are. That one is a very big issue for the food safety. And then so many people are worried about for the GMO. And then in agriculture sector also they are GMO seeds. GMO seeds production is they are higher and higher, and then threatening to the environment also. It's they are we are talking about the food safety issue. I think we have to consider about the GMO seeds, and then what about the consequence because that one is the imbalance for the herbicides. In the some states of the USA, 17 times of herbicide used for the GMO seeds, like this and then. So it's for the food safety research. I think, do you have a plan to control and then to do the research about the GMO? I think USA and Canada is not allowing labeled GMO food labeling on the food production. This is my
yeah. Thank you for your question. Well, it's the issue about GMO. I guess there's a very different perspective in different countries. First of all, we got to recognize that. Now, your comment. Let me see if I understand your first question about the 80% of produce. Well, let me clarify that there are a limited number of crops. They're currently commercially available in the market, and the crops are mostly corn, soybeans, canola, but they are not widely available. I guess the big crops, yes, corn, soybeans. The majority of the products grown in the U.S. are GMO. For other crops, it's a minor component. The tomato has not really yet made it successful in the market. The sugar beets, this has been in the market, yes. So, but this is emerging. So, I guess the key thing when we come down with perception, we gotta be careful in stating that everything is GMO. We gotta point out what exactly is GMO, and we gotta use science to illustrate this, and we gotta use the evidence that we have. Yes, when the people say that it's widely spread in the food supply, it is because corn ingredients, soybean ingredients are widely available, at least in the U.S. I'm not sure about this part of the world. So first of all, we need to clarify. Now, in terms of the safety of GMOs, this is the part that there is a lot of differences in the U.S. Experts like me in food safety, and I'm not. My specialty is not on GMOs, but I think based on what I've read of the scientific literature. In terms of safety, most of us believe that the hazard that GMOs are currently available for consumption is minimal for the consumer. At this point, this is the general belief. In Europe and other parts of the world, the argument is that, oh, well, we haven't really explored long-term effects, and that's a concern. So there are two different perspectives. One in which there are scientific studies that have shown plenty of studies have shown that the risk is minimal, but there is still the doubt or whether they are really safe or not. So it's an issue that I think, and I don't know if anybody in the audience that has had a much more extensive experience in actually conducting research would like to comment on this. But there is a lot of misconceptions sometimes and a lot of difference of opinion here.
Okay, that's great. I think we kind of run out of time. Any more questions can be done maybe during lunch or coffee.
Oh yeah, I'll be available for the next day and a half.
Yeah.
So I'll be happy if anybody wants to continue the conversation, please.
Yeah. So I would like to show appreciation with everyone to Dr. Prasadipat and also Professor as well. Put your hand together, please. Thank you very much. So it has been a great session, and I will pass back on to the MC, and everyone can go for lunch.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Harriet. Can we please? Again, once again, let's give them a warm round of applause for Dr. Prasadipat and Dr. Francisco, and as well as Dr. Harriet as well. Thank you very much. Before we proceed to lunch, I just want to have a short announcement. In your kit, there is an evaluation sheet, a one-page evaluation sheet brought to you by the organizers. So if you could just fill in the forms and submit them to the registration area, hopefully before the day ends, so we would know your feedback about the workshop today. And we will have a 1-hour break for lunch. It will be just downstairs on the first floor. So hopefully, I think it's 12:05. So we have at least 55 minutes to have lunch. And please be back here by 1 p.m. to continue in our afternoon session. All right. Have a good lunch and see you later at 1 o'clock.